Thank you very much, Sanjeev, for inviting me to do this. I think you figured I am a child of the 60s. Arif Bhai, honored to be on a stage with you. Arif Bhai and I go back to 1985 or thereabouts when the Shabana story broke out. And he was among the few honest voices in the Congress who spoke his mind. And that interview we did is still sitting on India Today's archives. That said, it's also the most perfect time, I suppose. The most perfect time in Indian politics is usually not the most perfect time. Uh, because most perfect time in Indian politics can't be a boring time, it has to be an exciting time. So it's a wonderful time to talk about this book and also for this book to be released. Congratulations, Sanjeev, for your timing, because this is just when the language controversy has come back to our lives as it had done in the Shastri era. There's almost the same ferocity, except Tamil Nadu is not on fire, right? But at the same time, at that point, there was no news TV to light those fires. So I don't know how Shastriji would have handled those fires. The fact is that Shastriji moved the Official Languages Act in 1963 as Home Minister. He was Prime Minister when the 15-year term of English language as the only official language came to an end. And there was immediate protests. People don't remember what the 60s were like. 60s was India's most dangerous decade, right? This is when DMK, Dravid movement, was a separatist movement. It was not a language movement. It was a separatist movement. And this fed straight into that. This is also the time when the Punjabi Suba movement was at its peak. That had its own separatist stream as well. Naga insurgency was at its peak. Nagas at that point had more than 10,000 automatic rifles, and Indian Army had none. Right? Indian Army was still graduating on to self-loading rifles. It was in that situation that the language issue came up, and his own party criticized him. The Hindi press attacked him. He was a poet. The Hindi poets attacked him because he was seen as a betrayer of Hindi. And what did he do to calm the tempers? He assured Hindi will not be imposed unilaterally, that English will continue to be an associate language, and the decision on how long English will continue will be left to non-Hindi states. That is when a lot in the Hindi heartland, what we now call as Hindi heartland, but that dominated the national press, called it a betrayal of Hindi and the silence of Shastri. Now, granular detail for a lot of that is available here, because a lot of people will not know. Because you have to understand a leader. It's one thing to say that Shastriji was only there for 19 months, right? How much could he have left behind in 19 months for us to be discussing now? And for us to have such a large audience, I know that Sanjeev has as much draw as Shah Rukh Khan in the city, but some credit goes to Shastriji as well. That in 19 months, sometimes in the game of cricket, in a movie, what makes more impact is a cameo, right? So Hardik Pandya comes and hits 4 sixes, the match turns. Somebody gets 100, that's forgotten. In a movie, somebody comes and does a cameo, that is remembered, the hero is forgotten. So Shastriji, in a way, was a cameo. 19 months in Indian political history is a cameo. However, if you set those 19 months in his era, and all of that is beautifully detailed in this book. This book should be a textbook on the 60s. This Google Chester Bowles. Chester Bowles was an American liberal. He came to India as ambassador twice. Once, I think in 51, 52 or thereabouts, he became friends with Nehru, then went back, tried his luck with politics, didn't work. At one point, Kennedy got rid of him because he found him to be too liberal, right? And then Kennedy sent him to India as ambassador. 63 to 69 he was ambassador. So that entire troubled period he was the ambassador. Now he brought with him what old Raja, Maharajas, invaders, or like Ghazni brought Al-Biruni, right? Somebody who will do the note taking, Boswell, right? So he brought along his own Boswell. His Boswell was a man called Selig Harrison, a scholar. Selig Harrison, in that tenure, wrote a book that became a landmark book at that point. That book was titled India's Most Dangerous Decades. That book basically predicted that India will now break up, that there were so many separatist tendencies, so much external threats. Indians couldn't get along, there were linguistic issues, there were religious issues, there was weak leadership, that India will break up. So 60s was the era of India's trial, and that's the era when India proved to the world that it could go past anything. So 62 we lost a war to China, no dispute about that. 63, the Hazrat Bal crisis took place in Kashmir because Pakistan thought there was a weakness in India. Indian armed forces were being rebuilt. YB Chavan, who also deserves a biography like this at some point of time, he was rebuilding India's armed forces. 1964, Nehruji died, but Nehruji had had a few very difficult months. He was hardly in control. Shastri was learning on the job like that. Then Shastri takes over, and almost immediately, within months after that, Pakistan puts Shastriji to trial by that relatively minor invasion into Cham to check out India's fighting power. Now the pressure at that point would have been great to go all guns blazing at the Pakistanis. But Shastriji had the ability to hold his nerve to say that this is not the time or terrain to fight the Pakistanis. However, he understood that Pakistanis had tested out the Indian side. They had already drawn the wrong lessons, so maybe right lessons from 1962. And with 65 Cham, they thought time had now come to give India a hard knock. Ayub famously said, the Hindu army, Hindu morale can't survive more than a couple of hard knocks. And that day will come. And preparations for 65 war started. And how quickly that was done, how prepared India was, that is a story that has been recorded again and again and again. So language was one. In fact, it was in protest against that language policy that even Sri Subramanian, the agriculture food minister who he had appointed, by way of sparking the Green Revolution. Again, most people don't realize that the founder of the Green Revolution was Lal Bahadur Shastri. All of this in 19 months, right? It was an incredible match-winning cameo. So he started the Green Revolution. He reached out to the Americans. He let the Americans work with Indian farmers, Indian farm research. He had his own IS officers go out to talent hunt and find Dr. Swaminathan, who worked with American scientists. He ducked the criticism from the left at that point, and you can imagine how powerful the left was, particularly because half the Congress, or two-thirds of the Congress was left, that he was not taking help from the Soviets or from the Chinese. And again, the book tells us about that, because he figured that Soviets were not able to feed their own people. They didn't have surplus. They were not producing any surplus. In any case, in Soviet Union, which also included Ukraine then, the land sizes were so humongous. In India, land sizes were small. Also, that the Chinese had just had the Great Leap Forward and the Great Famines. So there were no inspirations to be had from the communist world. So he was quite open-minded to learning from the Americans. So think about it. This took a lot of moral courage and confidence to do in the early mid-60s. It also took a lot of political risk, because if this had gone wrong, then American hand was everywhere at that point of time. Now, if you read the book, you will see that Sanjeev has recorded the remarkable empathy, the honesty, the great diversity of versions of what happened in Tashkent. Now, Tashkent is one of those stories which will keep WhatsApp burning forever, right? And maybe by tomorrow people will be asking Grok, so Grok, what happened in Tashkent? Or I would like to ask Grok, so Grok, which conspiracy theory is the most popular at Tashkent? So what he's done is, he's taken various versions. Tashkent agreement was a triumph, but Shastri got no praise for that. Pakistani side cursed Ayub because they said this was Pakistan's last chance of winning Kashmir and he lost it. It is true, this was Pakistan's last chance of winning Kashmir, but he didn't lose it in Tashkent. He had lost it in the battlefield. He lost it on day 3 of Cham, right? Because the moment India opened up at Wagah, he had lost his last chance. He had every advantage. His tanks could fight at night. His fighter planes could fight at night. His fighter planes had air-to-air missiles. His artillery was larger bore and longer range than ours. His tanks were much better than ours. In fact, our tanks, which could sort of equal his tanks, were not even more than a couple of hundred. In spite of that, he lost it on day 3, but he still got it because he had spread the mythology that he had won the war, so he got attacked by his press. Shastriji got attacked that he had given up Haji Pir Pass, and that is something for which he's even now attacked, although given the politics now, the BJP politics, they will not attack him, they will attack the Congress system, and if it was somehow possible, they will attack Jawaharlal Nehru for it. Unfortunately for Nehru and his legacy, he had died earlier. But there were realities at Tashkent that Shastriji faced with great stoicism. And when he figured that people were not happy with what he had done, think about it. Again, the present is a very good guide to the past. See what is Trump trying to do between Zelensky and Putin. He's saying you two guys are involved in a stalemate. None of you is winning. I'll sit you down. I will tell you you take this. I will tell you you take this. This is 2025, right? One of these two countries has the largest number of nuclear weapons in the world, many more than even America, right? A big power can do it. So you can imagine what Shastriji and Ayub were facing in Tashkent with Soviet Union committed to achieving this accord. So Shastriji was unhappy, and the book tells you that he called his family was unhappy, and then he was feeling low, and then Sanjeev tells us that Shastriji scribbled a couplet by Saqib Lucknowi on a piece of paper about how the whole world listened intently, but the storyteller fell asleep, narrating the story. कहानी सुनाने वाला सुना रहा है, लोग सुन रहे हैं, लेकिन सुनाने वाला सो गया. So did he actually have a premonition of what was going to happen at night? We don't know, but those questions remain. We also know that Shastriji had a history of hard challenges before that. This was the era of no ACGs, no stents, right? आजकल तो बच्चा पैदा होते वैक्सीन के साथ कहते हैं 4 स्टेंट भी लगा दो, right? तब तो कोई स्टेंट नहीं थे, कोई बाईपास नहीं था. There was almost no treatment for a heart issue. But think of the innovative things he did. When I opened this book, just coincidentally or maybe serendipitously, the first page that opened had a shorter para towards the bottom that said that Shastriji introduced recruitment of women bus conductors in India. An idea, as he says, ahead of its time, but a step toward breaking the patriarchy. Small but significant things like this never got the credit in historiography. A lot of what he did just got reduced to Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. This was almost reductive. And remember also, one of the first things he did when the ceasefire came, one of the first things he did was to make a visit to the Golden Temple. He went to the Golden Temple, he addressed a rally because he wanted to tell the Sikhs that we were brothers, because the Pakistanis were working on that separatist stream for a long time. Punjabi Suba impulse was very mixed up. And just after his death, we know that Punjabi Suba was created in 1966. I was in class 6, and I remember riots on the street in Batinda and other places, and the division of Punjab. But he had handled all that and kept things stable while he led India into the war. Other institutions he created. Again, a great leader is one who creates institutions, because Americans say one thing, Americans say many stupid things. But there is one very good thing the Americans say, which is that the only legacy you leave behind is people, right? To that, I will add a modification, because in politics, it's not just people, it's also institutions. So it's the institutions you build. So list the institutions. Again, the book tells you the Prime Minister's office. Can you imagine India did not have a PMO? Right? 3 generations have come up, सब कुछ PMO से चलता है. In under Jawaharlal Nehru, there was no PMO. So Shastri set up the PMO. He set up the CBI, the CBC, all of this. And I know other people will tell you, you must read the book, Border Security Force. BSF was founded in that 19-month period because everybody realized that when fighting started in the borders, when Punjab Armed Police, Rajasthan Armed Constabulary, Gujarat, whatever armed police it was called, they were manning that all those borders, and they were inadequate to the challenge that life had changed. And that's when some visionaries were called in from Indian police, what the precursor to IPS, and they got together and set up the BSF, and initially by co-opting the armed forces, the armed police battalions from these border states. So one great institution was built at that time. At this time, what, 120 battalions strong, or maybe even more than that. When I last checked a few years back, it was about 120 battalions strong. So you have a lens, Sanjeev, looking at Shastri's India versus Ayub's Pakistan that was spoken about earlier. Because when Shastri became PM, he had not traveled outside Asia, nowhere. Ayub, on the other hand, was like a global statesman. He was lionized in Washington, right? Americans loved him. Harold Wilson admired him. At that period, the Brits admired Pakistan. They still admire Pakistan a lot more than us. And if they still had their way, they will have Kashmir settled in the way that they want it settled, because they also think there is an institutional memory in Britain that thinks Kashmir is part of the unfinished agenda of partition as the Pakistanis think. So you can imagine what he was facing. Ayub was friends with General de Gaulle. At the same time, what was he doing? While he was fighting these wars, preparing for these wars, fighting a really, really nasty insurgency in Nagaland, General Pannu is here. He would have heard from his predecessors in the armed forces what a nasty insurgency that was in Nagaland. People forget. An Indian Air Force aircraft was shot down by the Nagas. An Indian Air Force Dakota was shot down. The crew were taken prisoner, right? And negotiations had to be carried out to rescue the crew. It's just a little sidelight that the commander of the aircraft, Air Force officer, was a brother-in-law of Devanand at that point, right? Small things keep coming back in history, but this is just to tell you what a tough time it was. So Green Revolution, I told you, he set up the Agricultural Prices Commission because he thought farmers were getting a raw deal. So a lot of what you see now, his Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, wasn't just a slogan. He took it very seriously, and he genuinely thought that Indian farmers were getting a raw deal, and unless he could make their lives better, India was not going to get out of starvation. Now, the notion that Shastri didn't get his due is so dominant among Indians, very dominant. In the Hall of Fame of the Congress Prime Ministers from the dynasty, Shastri's legacy didn't get enough sunlight, unfortunately. There is a Shastri Museum in Delhi, but the Indira Gandhi Museum gets more visitors. The PM Museum has corrected that to some extent. There is a whole section on him, so that's not even enough. Maybe 2 years is too short a time to leave a legacy, but books like this surely will fill that gap. And having said that, I will just give you one little personal story about this. I was in class 5 when 65 war took place, and Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, miss one meal a day and grow something in your little kitchen garden. So my school, I was going to school in a very small town those days. Now it's not so small, but still a small town. But 65, you can imagine, a tehsil, which had only one school, one Hindi medium school called Palwan. So the school decided to bring all the students to Delhi. So we all were bussed to Delhi to meet Shastri Ji and to greet him after the war and to congratulate him. And my mother, uh, she had stitched 6 pajamas for wounded Jawan and plucked spinach from her kitchen garden, which she started at Shastri Ji's call, and put that in a lifafa and gave it to me कि शास्त्री जी को मेरी तरफ से दे देना. Now, couple of group photos of that visit, my daughter rescued from some old cupboard, and those are still with us, and one of those still features on my tiny Instagram page as well. So Shastri Ji touched all our lives, and I'm so grateful that a book like this has come out. Please read this. This is like a thriller. 60s was the most thrilling decade in our history, and I hope to God we never live to see a decade more thrilling than that.
That was truly insightful reflection. That was truly. Thank you, Sri Shekhar Gupta ji, Dr. Aishwarya Pandit, and Sri Adarsh Shastri ji for your thought-provoking perspectives. To deliver the keynote address, it's our distinct honor to invite His Excellency Sri Arif Mahmud Khan, Honorable Governor of Bihar. A statesman of great repute, his reflections will definitely offer invaluable perspectives on Shastri Ji's enduring leadership and its indelible impact on India's socio-political fabric. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Governor of Bihar.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Author of the book and former director of Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy, Mussoorie, Shri Sanjeev Chopra ji, Director of India International Center, Shri K.N. Shrivastava ji, Shri Shekhar Gupta ji, Shri Adarsh Shastri ji, Dr. Aishwarya Pandit. Sunil Bhai is also sitting there, Shri Sunil Shastri. I think Mrs. Shastri is also there. Members of the IIC and young students from different colleges and universities of the NCR, ladies and gentlemen. I am grateful to Dr. Shri Sanjeev Chopra for the kind invite to this event organized to release his new book, The Great Conciliator, Lal Bahadur Shastri and the Transformation of India. For me, it's a great opportunity not only to redeem the promise which I made to him few years back when I visited the academy and he informed me that he is going to write a book on former Prime Minister Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri. But this is also an opportunity to pay my tributes to the memory of a great Indian who rose to the highest position in the country without any advantages of birth, wealth, or privilege. It was the spirit of democracy deeply entrenched in Indian psyche, inherited from our ancient spiritual and cultural ethos, the functioning reality of Indian democracy, and not merely a theoretical principle that prepared the ground for him to assume the mantle of leadership at a very difficult time in our history. It was due entirely to his force of character and integrity of life. These things enabled him to rise to the top. Shastri Ji's Shastriji's life was an example of one who firmly believed that if there was a conflict between economic and ethical interests, prefer the ethical and do not bother about the economic. Artha Shastroktam Utsirajya Dharma Shastroktam Acharet. Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri had a social passion. He joined the Servants of People Society established by Lala Lajpat Rai, and after retirement from presidentship of Shri Purushottam Das Tandon, he took it up. That shows that social revolution is a moral protest against the great disparities which prevail and against the instabilities which condition many people who suffer from squalor, poverty, and disease. All these things indicate that we should have resentment against squalor, poverty, against suffering by ordinary people. That is what we need to possess, and his whole life was an example of that. Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri never acquiesced in the impropriety or the inequity of allowing democracy to function in a way that millions of our people lead barren, fruitless, impoverished lives. His successful initiatives to bring about white revolution and subsequently green revolution paved way for great transformation and benefited the farmers and the country a great deal. Right from the days of freedom movement, he earned a great reputation as a man of organization. Whenever there was any conflict in Congress circles, in any province, he was called upon to go, approach the problem and try to settle it in almost all cases. This is what senior, not today's leaders, his contemporaries, this is what they have said, that in almost all cases he succeeded in reconciling the conflicting people and their interests. But ultimately, when the conflict with Pakistan came, he fought back. He gave instructions to the army not to withdraw and not to relent, but to do their duty. This is the time when people saw a determined leader who rose to his height. He made stirring speeches, made enthusiastic appeals to people, and became a people's hero. He gave energy and vigor to the Indians. He worked them all up and presented to the world a spectacle of the united India, of a consolidated, strengthened India. And in one of his speeches on All India Radio, he said, I want to state categorically that force will be met with force, and aggression against us will never be allowed to succeed. True to his words, Indian forces met the aggression squarely and knocked on the doors. Just now, you have, the earlier speakers have given you in detail how after Cham he ordered our forces to cross into Pakistan from Wagah border. So he ordered them to knock on the doors of Lahore and cross the Rajasthan border into Pakistan. And in spite of that, he agreed to Tashkent in the hope of finding some permanent peace, as he had earlier agreed on Kutch Tribunal. He told our defense minister, the then defense minister, we resisted aggression and we fought with all our zeal and earnestness. Now let us fight for peace with the same zeal and earnestness. Here the action of Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri was completely in consonance with ancient Indian ethos, which emphasized that we should be equipped fully with knowledge and wisdom, that is the soft power, and at the same time armed with weapons of war. First, we must use soft power to resist any aggression, but if the aggressor believes only in the law, is not ready to listen to the power of logic and believes only in the logic of power, then we must have the strength to repel the aggressor. Agarta chaturo veda, prashta sasharam dhanu, idam brahmam, idam shastram, shastradapi, shastradapi.